Pacifica Historical Society, host of our show, Footprints of Pacifica, where we explore and discover some of the fascinating and enchanting history of Pacifica. Our focus tonight will be on the castle, the very famous historic building that will take us to the 1900s. And Pacifica wasn't named then, but the castle will be explored directly with its current caretaker, 90-year-old Ray Gracia. We had a tour of that, and then we'll come back to the studio and share some more history with Jerry Crow, the historian. And now, let's take a tour of the castle. We're here at the castle in Pacifica, most historic building, and we're here with Sam Mazza's caretaker, who is Ray Gracia. Now, Ray has been here for about 30 years, and we're going to take a little tour of the castle and some of the items. But first I want to talk about Sam. What did Sam do professionally before he got involved with the castle? What was his work?
He's a painter. He was a painter for theaters, Hollywood stars and all that. He did all the painting for them.
And when he bought the building, did you know what he had in mind? Was he going to live here? What was he going to do with the castle?
He bought it as a hobby. Just as a hobby, he said. He told me, he said, I don't live in it, I don't use it, it's just a hobby. A place to put my junk, is what he said.
Well, tell us about the junk. How did he acquire junk?
It's hard to say, but he got most of the stuff from these debris boxes.
You mean he didn't buy them at antique shows?
No, he bought some, and his brother bought some. His brother used to go to Italy and bring back certain pieces, statues maybe, have it shipped over. But Sam, most of the stuff you see around, Sam says, I find them in the dumpsters.
Well, did Sam go around looking in dumpsters to watch what was being...
No, if they tore a building down next to his other building and he'd seen what they threw in there, at nighttime he'd go down and pick it up when the contractor went home.
So he paid nothing for them?
He paid nothing for it.
They became his because they were abandoned property anyway?
Well, he had probably got 19 pieces of property in San Francisco. So whatever he found, he had a use for.
There's one property that he bought on Miraloma that you told me something about. Could you share that?
The woman wanted to sell a house.
Yeah.
And she wanted $25,000 for the house. But Sam didn't want the house, but he spotted an organ that was in there, and he wanted the organ because it was ancient, old. So he offered to buy it, and she wouldn't sell it. But he wanted it so bad, he bought the house.
Just to get the organ?
Just to get the organ. He moved the organ from Miraloma down to the castle here. After he got it in the castle, 2 weeks later, he sold the house. Now, he bought it for $25,000, sold it for $27,000. So he got the organ and $2,000 besides. But he was sharp, you know.
How about using it? You said that he never slept here. Did he do anything here other than admire his collection?
He didn't sleep here. His wife didn't like the building, and he never slept there. Nobody slept there. Just come down there and watch television once in a while, make sure the roof didn't leak and things like that. But he never lived here. Nobody ever lived here.
Do they have parties here?
Oh, tons of parties.
Ah.
Oh, but you got to go way back when parties were parties. When Pete McCloskey was down here, Governor Reagan was down here, Joe Alioto, everybody was here.
The former mayor of San Francisco?
Yeah. And all the police department, the head of the police department, you can go way back to probably a police O'Brien if there was one. They were for years ago. Sam was a party man.
We're going to take a tour around the place with you, and hopefully you can point out some things that were important to Sam and important to the history of the castle. One last question while we're here. The address of the castle.
This is 900 Mirador.
Mirador?
Mirador, 900 Mirador. Everybody thinks up in the roof that's 1908. That's when the place was built, 1908. But that's 900 is at Mirador, is the address.
We're gracious that you would be here, Mr. Gracia.
I leave people that come from Petaluma, Santa Rosa, they drop by, they say, oh, gee, can we go in? I said, well, I'm working on the yard. I'm only the gardener. I don't have a key for a front gate, for a front door. But if you want to walk around, be my guest. They appreciate that much.
But you're more than the gardener. You're the caretaker, and you're the close friend of Sam Mazza, who owned the place and decorated this place, and you've been with it as part of the history of Pacifica.
Piece of furniture that you don't see at all. Very seldom see something like this. This is one of the hidden treasures that if you don't know it's there, and you don't know it operates like that, you never know it. But things like that, things all like this around there, Sam had mirrors all over the place. Fireplace works, everything works. It's beautiful in there. This was Sam's office. Sat here. He had pictures of his mother and father here, pictures of himself. There's a goose that laid the golden egg right here. And he did a lot of work here. He had a lot of contractors that he did business with. And he had their names in the book. All these pictures you see, they're all numbered and they're all insured. This little old telephone, years old, still works. It's in good working order right now. This over here is an old dictaphone. And everything works in there. Everything, the lamps, they all light up. Yeah, they all work. Everything works. The old chime lights that, where he found them, I don't know. Looks like a German light with all these pegs on it. Now we can go in another room if you want. It's just a sitting room. This thing here, I don't know where he got it or how he got it, but it is a beautiful piece of work there. Where he got them all, I don't know, but they are beautiful. When I come down, he's laying there watching TV. And I said to him, Sam, what are you doing? Watching TV. How come? Got to get away from my wife, he said. And he had a real sweet wife, really nice woman.
What's the next room for us to look at?
Okay, we'll go down the line. You know, maybe you heard this, but this was the front doorbell. Watch. At one time from up there. This here, four-poster bed. This actually is only the only bedroom, but like I say, nobody ever slept in here. You know, I guess if somebody wanted to sleep here, they could, but it's kind of creepy at night. That was, yeah, this here is from William Holden. That's, hey, you want to see Sam? He's in there. There he is, Sam. No. Well, look, take a good look. Sam? No. But there's nothing in there. Sam's gone. This is the organ that he bought the house and brought the organ down here. There it is. He wanted it. What Sam wanted, he bought. Crowns all over. Where he got them, I don't know. Here's something you don't see too much anymore. The old-time horn off of a what? Cadillac.
Oh.
Yeah, you know.
I wouldn't get out of the way for that.
No.
Thank you. I'm moving now.
Yeah, that works. Is that ringing? That's crystal. I think this thing comes off in 3 pieces. I'm not sure, but I know it don't come off in one. There's pictures of years ago when Sam had parties in here. This is when the Navy had it, like I say, with the dogs.
The
Once they
fireplace.
rent this place, oh, this works, everything works. Oh, yeah, I light them up. Yeah, everything works here, too. So, but at one time, Sam had bottles of liquor all on these shelves. Right down here, where the supermarket is, Sam wanted to buy that property and run a train up here and make a bread and breakfast out of this place. And the city wouldn't give him a permission. It never developed. He liked stained glass. With these windows here, whatever he could find, he put stained glass in them and put it up against the building. But on a nice day, you see the farallones out there. Beautiful day. You see the pier, you know, you see the golf course. It's a beautiful view, everything.
$1 million view.
Now, you want to go in the kitchen? Here's the kitchen. Used to grind them and get the operator. I know, but you don't remember this, but years ago they had them. I remember. Because we had them in the house that we lived in. This is the kitchen. They had some beautiful parties in here. Silverware, all kinds of silverware. Tons of it. But Sam had big parties, you know, and he had to have all the silverware. Like I say, this is the closest you ever get to heaven, I'll tell you. Beautiful up here. That's a lookout. Those are little lookout corners for the ocean. When the Navy had it. Here's a nice view from here too. $1 million view. $1 million view from out here.
We're here in the studio with Jerry Crow, also a member of the Historical Society and a archivist now. Tell us, Jerry, how did you get involved with the Historical Society?
Well, shortly after I moved to Pacifica in 1992, Bill Drake and Mason Brown were kind enough to invite me into the Historical Society, and I got involved right away and served as president for 7 years. And as you mentioned, I'm currently the archives chair, and that occupies a lot of my time.
You spent a lot of time, I think, with Bill Drake and others in producing a book about the history of Pacifica.
That's right. Originally, the concept was that it would be a very comprehensive book, maybe 500 or 600 pages, and it was slow developing, and as it happened, Arcadia Publishing came along just at the right time with a concept that involved a richly illustrated version of a book and about the amount of text that we were capable of putting together, and so we did that book in a period of about a year.
And that gave you more of the background of the castle.
The castle was definitely included in there.
The castle was built by whom?
It was built by Henry Harrison McCloskey in 1908, and I thought I'd take a minute to read through the various owners that have had the castle from that time to the current time.
Well, when McCloskey took it over, what was the reason for him to come to Pacifica? He hadn't been here prior to that.
He had a house in San Francisco that was damaged during the earthquake of 1906, and he was anxious to find a place where he could build something sturdy enough that it would never fall in his term.
So how long did he hold on to the property?
Well, he bought it in 1908. Then in the winter of 1914, he died, and in 1915, his widow sold the property to a Dr. Galen Hickok.
And what did Hickok also use it as a residence?
His idea was mainly to make a hospital out of it. His residence was in Berkeley, and he was in the medical profession and had a partner in San Francisco. The idea was that the castle would serve as a convenient convalescent site for the people that had had surgery.
I'm sorry to disturb you here, but convenient up on that hill? How are they going to get there, and how patients are going to get up there, and why would they be coming here for that? No other hospitals?
It's restful, peaceful. That's what you'd look for, I think, to convalesce if you had the choice.
And yet, a few years later, somebody from the police department came out and looked into that hospital.
Well, as it happened, just below the castle, in the house that's the large gray house that's still there, was a detective. Let me find his name.
Johnson?
No, his name was E.J. Hutley.
Hutley.
Yes, and he had noticed taxis arriving late at night, and his suspicions were becoming aroused. Then, in 1920, it happened that Mr. Castile called the police saying that his wife Bertha was there, and he suspected that something nefarious was going on because he described it as a place where girls and women would go if they did not want to become mothers.
Now, that at the time was quite illegal, but did he suffer for anything by that?
Well, in response to that call, a San Francisco police detective, Miles Jackson, accompanied by policewoman Catherine O'Connor, came and knocked on the door and asked for entry. The attending nurse there, Cleo Tevis, said, "Sure, come on in, there's nothing to hide here." And the police found in residence Bertha Castile plus 2 underage girls at the time. After questioning them, they determined that at least one abortion had been accomplished, and so that very night, Dr. Hickok was arrested in his Berkeley home.
Did he go to trial?
He went to trial, and even though he protested his innocence for the full duration of the trial, it took the jury only 7 minutes to come to the conclusion that he was guilty.
In addition to those young ladies, was there also some evidence that the neighbors spotted around the castle?
There was word of that. The police dug up the grounds pretty extensively, looking for the bones of
They did find some bones.
They did find some charred bones, but they turned out not to be human, so there was no evidence involved in that.
So much for the science and evidence
Oh, another
today.
rumor, yes.
But what happened to the castle after that? He went to prison, But his family still owned it. As a matter of fact, there's a little mystery about who owned it at any given time. What did you find out about that?
Well, during the period that it was in Hickok's hands, it actually was transferred from one name to another about 6 times in a period of several years, possibly to help conceal the true ownership, but who can say? He was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in jail. So in 1922 then, the property was sold to the next owner.
What did the next owner use it for?
That was a Mr. Hewitt,
Mm-hmm.
and he put it into service as a speakeasy during Prohibition.
There was a few young people in the audience. Could you explain the speakeasy process?
Well, during Prohibition, the serving of whiskey, of course, was against the law. A speakeasy was one of the names they gave to the places that secretly went on serving anyway. And in fact, the consumption of whiskey in America did not drop during Prohibition. It may have actually increased despite the illegality of it. But he named the place Chateau Lafayette and tried to make a Tony place out of it.
But the castle in that lifetime had quite a bit of competition. Even though there was Prohibition, you told me before the show there was something like 100 and some odd speakeasies or the equivalent up from San Francisco.
That was, yes, in the case of San Francisco. There were some very notable speakeasies along the coast, like the Maury Tavern. There was at least 2 places at Rockaway where one could be satisfied, and several others up and down the coast.
What happened after that? Changed hands again? And
Well, apparently
when?
the Hewitts weren't too successful because the property reverted to the Hickok family, actually his wife's family, in 1924. And shortly after that was sold again to Walter and Margaret Howard. And in January 1927, it was sold again to Claude and Nellie Lewis. And I think these were people that just use it for a home.
As a residence.
Nothing fancy in their plans. February 1928, it was sold to Clarence and Annie Eakin. And they held it until Sam Mazza bought it in April of 1959.
And Sam Mazza added one extension. I think there was a outdoor, a porch added. But other than that, it's the original. When we asked Ray the other day, how many rooms are there? He says there's 14 rooms, but if you ask Sam, there's 24. He counted a bathroom, a half closet, anything he would count to add up to the number of rooms. And speaking of the McCloskeys earlier, the relationship of Henry McCloskey, his son grew up there for a while and went to school in Lowell High in San Francisco. That's in the 1914 or so. And then there's Pete McCloskey. How do all those names relate?
Well, the original McCloskey to come to this country came from Ireland to New Orleans, where he got work as a carpenter. And he was frugal, saved some money, bought a couple of lots, and subsequently sold those in order to afford passage to California, which was an arduous trip that took him 3 years to accomplish. He got here with his 2 children, his wife having died earlier, and they took up residence in San Francisco and started farming. And so Henry Harrison was one of those 2 children, so he began his career as a farmer, but then went to law school, got his degree, and became counsel for the Ocean Shore Railroad. And that's the position he held at the time that he bought the property here.
The design of the castle, what inspired Henry McCloskey?
Probably his origins, his great-grandfather, as I mentioned, or his grandfather came from Ireland. The castle design has been described as after a Scottish castle, so that's another possibility. Henry Harrison named it Windermere in the first place, which refers to a lake in England, so that's a third possibility. And who knows which is the more accurate, but it certainly went back to the old country.
And then in the war, it had another persona. World War II.
In 1942, the U.S. Coast Guard leased the property. They were running beach patrols from Muscle Rock down to Rockaway Beach. The patrols consisted of a lone sailor plus his dog. It went on 24 hours a day for the purpose of preventing spies and saboteurs from being landed by Japanese submarines along our coast here. So their headquarters at that time was the castle. It was not very convenient for them. It was underpowered, didn't have enough electricity.
Did they spot any ships, submarines, anything
No,
that
they
threatened the coast?
apparently kept them away.
And they were guarding the beach as well.
That's right.
Okay, now Pete McCloskey later went on to be a congressman, but the castle had a role in his political career. He came back here in 1967 after having grown up in the South, never knowing, even when he went to Stanford Law School and graduated and opened a practice in Woodside, he never knew of the castle. It was also a mystery. In 1967, when he came to run for Congress, this was a Democratic county, and he knew nobody. And then, in 1967, his father told him that he himself had grown up in Pacifica. Let's go up to Pacifica and start shaking hands and meeting the neighbors. And the rest is history. A Republican won in the county for the first time in history, served in Congress for 15 years, led the impeachment process against Nixon. So he was, and even was a candidate for President of the United States. All an outgrowth, perhaps, of the castle's great history. And so, if there's any time people want to see the castle, how available is it to them?
It's operated by a foundation that was set up by Sam Mazza's will. Jeanette Kuhl is the trustee, and
So they would just call the castle and talk to Jeanette about it.
That's right.
However, there's one great opportunity for our listeners, and that's to come to the Pacifica Historical Society party on the first weekend the first Sunday in December, where only members can come. And that's going to be our wrap-up from here for now. Thanks, Jerry, for being with us. And remember, lives of great men all remind us we can make our lives sublime, and departing, leave behind us footprints in the sands of time.